theatre, film, TV and more. Suzy Rong reviews it all on Joy Drive.
And it's a fresh Suzy Rong, fresh from holidays. Do you feel fresh, Suzy?
I actually do. Perth is such a wonderful city. I love Perth, visiting Perth so much. I was there for half of the time that I was in WA, and for 3 days I was with my family who have come from Singapore, and we were visiting Mandurah, which was an hour away from Perth.
Did you eat lots of food with your family?
Oh, they eat so much.
And
I don't know if they're thinking that because we're all together, it's always a celebratory kind of situation. But I thought they were eating so much. To me, I wasn't quite used to it.
But isn't that lovely? You get together with your family. Were you in the one house? You mentioned beforehand, I think you were going to stay there.
We were in one very big house.
It was big, good.
And it's big. It's right on the sort of canal there. And one morning there were like 5 dolphins just in the backyard. So that was quite fantastic. The house was huge. I had my own bedroom. It was a big bedroom, and I had my own bathroom, and I was grateful for that.
Fantastic. The dolphins must have heard Suzy Rong was in town.
Yes, they were very kind to pay a visit.
Oh, that's good. Now, Suzy, we watched KYLIE on which is on Netflix. If you've seen it, you'd like to join in. 0427 569 949 is the SMS number. Suzy, what did you reckon?
Oh, KYLIE is a legitimate national treasure, having made herself a dominant presence in pop music for all over the world for over 4 decades. Today we're discussing her 3-part Netflix documentary simply named KYLIE that takes as close a look as we've ever been allowed at her life from birth till now. This isn't an unauthorized biography, so she's only going to show you what she's willing to. Admittedly, the filmmakers are somewhat persuasive in pushing KYLIE to talk about a few things that she has up to now kept silent about. Memorable sections of the doco includes the sexism she faced at the start of her recording career, being referred to pejoratively as the singing budgie for years, her relationships with people like Jason Donovan and Michael Hutchins. It was interesting to find out how these breakups happened, and probably most crucially, she talks at length about her experiences with cancer. Now, the pop princess is always associated with all things frilly and frothy, but her health troubles have allowed us to regard her with much more depth, to see her as a real person with a vulnerability that was perhaps never part of the shiny commercial package previously. In the doco, the topic of cancer is a pivotal element, probably the only thing that makes the series universally relevant, and it is in fact deeply moving. I did a fair bit of crying, but that's partly because KYLIE has been a key part of my obsession with pop music since the very start, although I'm fairly certain that anyone with a heart will be inspired by these revelations of resilience while witnessing the triumph of the human spirit. A lot of KYLIE's appeal has to do with how she is permanently considered an underdog in a world that habitually relegates women in pop culture to lower ranks, especially if they make unapologetically uplifting music. Even if she has become filthy rich now, there is still an instinct to protect her, which is, I think, one of the main emotions we experience in this Netflix production. Warren, have you ever seen her live in concert?
No, I haven't seen her live, but I have seen her live. When she was in Neighbours, I used to go to school nearby, and of course the Fox FM studios were out there as well, and I would go and sort of hang out there. And she was filming Neighbours, her with Jason Donovan. So I haven't met her there. She probably won't remember, but I have seen her act live, but I haven't actually seen her perform live. But KYLIE's kind of, I feel like, I don't know whether it's just a gay thing or what, but I feel like we're attached to her for certainly most of my gay life. We're similar ages, and her songs came out when I was at the club, so I feel quite attached to KYLIE in some ways. It's almost like, as a community, we've shared a life with her. And the documentary, Suzy, reminded me that no matter how much we think we know somebody, we rarely know the full story, do we? KYLIE was one of the most recognisable people on the planet, yet there was an enormous things happening in her life that most of us knew nothing about, or how she was coping with them. It made me think how many people we pass every day who might be carrying something significant without us even realising, Suzy. We just make assumptions.
Yeah, the thing about KYLIE is I think she does protect her kind of commerciality quite well. Like anything that's gonna have negative impacts on how we think about her, I think is always kept away. And even in this documentary, I think like it's a very flattering portrait, you know. It does reveal some of the not so nice things that happened, but these things happened 30 years ago, you know, how she left Jason for Michael, for example. It's taken a long time for this to come out. And at that time, if we had known, it probably would have been quite bad news for her business wise. But now she's able to let us know all those juicy details because it no longer matters. But I think she's still very much in control. I don't think we know that. Obviously, it's okay for us to know all her troubles with her health. I think it wins us over to her side even more strongly. But I think I feel like she's pretty guarded. Much as the documentary is very, very moving. And, yeah, I mean, also, you know, that there's no end to how much you can know a person. In a documentary, it's finite time. There's always more that you can dig. And I do feel like, there's some stuff that I want to know more, but, it is a very satisfying watch.
I wonder if one of the she didn't, it's revealed in the documentary about her, second cancer diagnosis that we didn't know about. And I wonder if, KYLIE is just that natural person. She doesn't like to necessarily reveal things, and certainly something like that. I mean, watching that documentary, that stuck with me. Her decision to keep her second cancer diagnosis largely to herself. I could understand that. I had a period in my life where I've received a very serious diagnosis, and I told almost nobody. And at the time, I thought I was protecting myself and protecting other people from worrying. But looking back, you're just dealing with the diagnosis yourself. And I wonder if that's sort of her and the way she just doesn't like necessarily to tell everyone everything. She struck me as being very genuine when I watched it.
Yeah, I think in this documentary, she seems genuine. Like I said, I feel like she's guarded, but what she does say, she's very sincere, and that's wonderful. The second diagnosis really is really interesting. It makes me think that she probably had learned so much from that first experience and understood how the news can affect her, her in a very personal way. And maybe she found a way to kind of not be so revealing with it, or I don't know. The documentary kind of leaves it a little bit hanging because it feels like it's very recent, and it never talks about how much of it is still with her, what her status is, and that is a bit of a concern.
I wonder if also, there's a lot of effort goes into, we can't speak for KYLIE's experience, but we can kind of speak for our own, but a lot of effort goes into hiding illness, and at the same time when the side effects of treatment can be sort of hard to disguise, and you're making excuses for why you're tired, why you can't make plans, why you're not feeling yourself, yet you become very good at managing other people's perceptions and the lies you tell to, just to hide something very private. Carrying it takes a lot of energy, and the cost is much bigger than you realise. And I wonder if that's what's going on there with KYLIE. It's hard to know, but I wonder if it's kind of just easier sometimes not to tell people as well, as particularly a public figure like KYLIE.
Yeah, she's... While she's going through the second experience of cancer, she's had such a huge impact with the recent music that she's done. Padam Padam, was a massive hit. And, that was probably around the time that she had that second diagnosis. And I think a very interesting kind of subtext of this documentary is how driven she is. I think she always comes across as such a sweet, tiny stature, a sweet woman with a tiny stature. We kind of don't think of her as being incredibly ambitious and driven. And in watching this documentary, I thought, wow, you are unstoppable. Some people are forces of nature. And I guess I always knew that she has this ability to kind of get people to pay attention to her. But in this documentary, I could see how actually she is quite the quite the ambitious and driven person, business-wise, and it's made me look at her slightly differently.
Look, I've got to admit, I always liked Kylie, but after the documentary, I really respect her, and I kind of, I like her drive and her determination and what she's been through and her resilience. And, we can see that now. You can only see that with hindsight when you've been through all these things. But I really felt like I connected to her with that documentary. I thought, oh, go Kyle. I respected her. But after seeing the documentary, I thought, oh, Kylie, I'm such a fan now of you and what you've been through. And I like your determination. I like what you're doing with your career. And you took hold of it. She took hold of it. And she went out on that indie label or whatever, and it didn't work out. And she admits she went back to pop. I missed it, she said. I think that's great. Pop.
I do think that queer people and women have always understood her strength. Maybe not in such an explicit way. I think instinctively we knew that there's something worth loving about this woman and, previously this girl. I don't think we would analyze it very closely, but I think we knew that she just had this incredible strength, and we saw how she was always, working against the odds, and she kind of never stopped doing it, and she always did it with a $1 billion smile.
I can remember, I think, was it being at, one of the parties here in Melbourne? I think it was, I don't know if it was New Year's Eve or something, one of those ones they used to have down at the docks, and spinning around was playing on the DJ was playing Spinning Around, and everyone was just going absolutely nuts over it. And that sort of, to me, encapsulates the power of Kylie's music, is just to galvanise everyone, just get them around and have a really good time. And for me, that's what it represents. It's, everyone having a really good time. But I love how... I wonder if that's one of the reasons, she's also resonated so strongly with queer people. Many of us have experienced, I suppose, periods where we've hidden parts of ourselves, whether it's sexuality, gender identity, relationships, other parts of our lives. And we've got that shared understanding of what it's like to carry something important privately and present a different version of yourself to the world. And sort of feeling a lot of queer people know intimately. So watching the documentary, I found myself wondering whether that's part of the emotional connection people feel with Kylie. What do you reckon, Suzy?
Look, when I was, in the 80s and 90s, and how people would kind of consider her music as being really trashy and cheap. But gay men especially, I guess... maybe all of the queer community, I'm not sure, but gay men, especially at that time, really embraced her. I think we understood that society would celebrate people like Bruce Springsteen, Bob Dylan, and the Beatles, right? Yep. And we understood what that was. And that aligns really well with how we experience homophobia and transphobia. If you're not if you don't present a certain way, you are kind of... you are kind of not a winner. And I think we understood, we kind of had that affiliation with Kylie. And one last thing I would say to anyone who's never seen her sing live, go and see her sing live. The show has she does an incredible staging. Her staging is incredible. She's done 40 years of pop music. She knows how to do a pop concert. But just to hear her sing live is quite something, and she never gets enough credit for that. The quality of the level of her singing, especially for a woman in her 50s, is incredible. I
remember the headlines, the budgie headlines. I remember thinking, that's really mean. Almost, that protective feeling that we get. That was really mean to call her that, a singing budgie. What a horrible thing. I wonder who invented that, who came up with it.
And it's not true, because if you listen to her old recordings, some of the recordings, you can hear that the production happened really quickly, as was explained
really
in the documentary. But her voice was always there. She always knew how to sing. And I've always admired her for that. And yeah, just hearing her do the big notes, the high notes live in person is one of the great joys.
Suzy, lots of artists have got gay fans, Kylie kind of feels different in some ways. For many people, she isn't just a pop star. She's almost part of the community. And when Kylie succeeds, queer people celebrate. When she's criticised, people get protective, like the budgie time. And there are, very few artists, well, I can think of anyway, where the relationship
She's done
feels
a
that
lot
personal.
for queer people. She's performed at Mardi Gras, which is a big statement. And when we were fighting for marriage equality, she did come out and kind of expressed her position on it and gave her support. And that's wonderful. And these things happen so infrequently for queer people. We remember it for life.
I wonder if that's why we, the connection is so strong, and why we've, I suppose, almost adopted her as part of the queer family.
Yeah, and for many, many phases of her career, other people have abandoned her, and we've never let her go.
No, exactly. See, we're dependable. Don't knock us. Unlike your other friend.
Yeah, show us your loyalty and we'll be with you 100.
One other thing, Suzy, before to go, I want to talk about was pop music. A lot of people, I've noticed when I talk, they say, what sort of music do you play? And I said, we just play pop music, queer artists. And they roll their eyes with pop. Pop's got a bit of shame to it, hasn't it, really? I find some...
I think that happens a lot in Australia, especially. Not only Australia, but Australia has a very kind of tight relationship with rock music, music that has a lot of guitar in it. Yeah, that was one of the things that stood out to me when I first moved to this country, because I don't listen to music that's got a lot of guitar in it. And when I came over here, I did notice that almost all the music that I loved were considered very lowbrow. And I think, it's changed a bit over the decades, but it still lingers a bit.
I think also sometimes a 3-minute pop song is exactly what we need. We might like different kinds of music as well. I know I do, but not every song has to change the world. Sometimes music just gives us joy, lets us escape, it gives us comfort or a chance to, dance around the kitchen listening to KYLIE. KYLIE's always understood that, and I reckon sometimes we perhaps overanalyze and underestimate the value of just some simple joy. Nothing
and so much of it has stood the test of time. A lot of stuff that we thought would throw away in the moment. If we look back 20, 30 years ago, what artists like KYLIE have done, they mean something now. And I think that's incredibly special. And
as a friend of mine in London said to me once, I think it was 1999 when I was over there, said, hey, Warren, KYLIE's an amazing ambassador for Melbourne. And she is. She's great.
Okay, I'll take your word for it.
Suzy, what are we watching next week?
Next week, we are checking out a story about the feud between a bar owner in Manchester's gay village, played by Alan Cumming, and his neighbour, a nasty neighbour, in the new series Tiptoe from the creator of It's a Sin and Queer as Folk. Tiptoe can be streamed on Binge and Foxtel. I'll see you next Tuesday. Bye-bye.
Missed the show?